What's up, everybody? My name's Nick. Welcome to my shop. In this video series, we're going to be going through basics and I'll be answering some questions that I commonly get as far as technical aspects of some of uh, the hand tool work that I do. From joinery to finish and sharpening to what tools should you buy first. That's what this series is going to cover. And today we are going to start with the question that I get the most often, and that is typically from beginner woodworkers, and it is asking, okay, I want to start woodworking. Where do I start? I mean, there's 100 different manufacturers of 1,000 different tools. But what's that like core toolbox that I really need to get started doing things that you're doing? So I'll start off by answering that. And it's going to widely vary based on what you want to build. If you are like me, I assume that you're here because you like some of the aesthetic and some of the more detailed pieces that I do. So I'm going to be relating it towards that kind of the one-off bespoke furniture realm. If you're going to be doing kitchen cabinets, anything else, like if you're going to be a chair maker 100% of the time, it's going to be totally different. So take this all with a grain of salt. This is definitely my opinion, but if I did it over again, these are the things I think I would prioritize the most. I'm going to start somewhere I don't think everyone would start, but for me, getting really, really clean, precise joinery, really taking your craft to the next level starts with um, keeping your tools deadly sharp. Everything just comes out cleaner, and joinery is easier if everything you're working with is absolutely razor sharp. So what I'm working with here, this is probably more stones than you're going to need. The first, and this is something I wish I had bought right off the bat, it's the Atoma 400 diamond plate. So this cuts incredibly fast. It's great for lapping the backs of chisels, as well as flattening other whetstones. None of this is sponsored. This is all just things that I've found that I enjoy, that I like, and uh, if I ever do have a sponsored series, it'll be because I've reached out to somebody that I already use. And then for stones, there is a million different types of stones, and I don't think any of them are better than another. Um, the thing that I would recommend first is to buy a nice one first, a nice set. So if you're like the rest of us, you'll probably start with a dual-sided $40 one off Amazon, and uh, that is going to do you fine for about 5 minutes. Um, what I'm using here are the Shafton Pros. Shafton Glass are great. The one thing I don't personally like are soaking stones. The ones from Lee Nielsen are also the Oishi water stones. They're great. Soaking stones, probably if you're a hobbyist, are going to be great. When I need to sharpen, I need to sharpen. I don't want to sharpen in 10 minutes. The advantage here, these are all synthetic stones, and it goes from 400, 800, 1,000, I think it's 3,000, 5,000, 12,000. And if you know the color code on these, I'm colorblind. Let me know in the comments. I could have gotten that totally wrong. Um, but it's something close to that. The thing I like about these is they are synthetic. They stay really flat for a fair amount of time, and to sharpen, all you have to do is spray. I use a little mixture of Dawn dish soap, water. You spray and go. Um, You can try doing freehand, but you'll never get razor sharp results. Sharp is the result of two perfectly flat surfaces meeting at a point. And to do so, I really like the Mark II from Veritas. It's a great jig. Just makes, loading it in and tighten it down. I have this little block set up on my sharpening station here, so I know exactly where 25 degrees is. And you just sharpen it down, and I'm ready to sharpen. And to touch up, it's about 10 swipes per stone, and then a lapping plate at the end. I use MDF for a lapping plate instead of leather. I've just found leather to round over the edges a little bit. So this will bring me to my second point. I think a good set of chisels. I would not start with Japanese blue steel. That's what these are. They get razor sharp. They stay razor sharp for a really long time, but that is at a cost. They're pretty brittle and they're pretty unforgiving. So for my first set, I started with the Narexes. They were a pain to lap. They did not come flat, but they're pretty reasonable price-wise. And I think with this 400 Atoma, you'll have no problem getting those flat. They're a great set. Lee Nielsen also makes a great set if you want to spend a little bit more money. And you don't need all 10 sizes. A 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, and 3/4 are probably going to do you well for 99% of what you do. The fishtail was one of my favorite additions. That one's great for like half blind dovetails and getting into like tricky corners. Again, I think a core set is going to be just fine. So the second thing I think you need to do a lot of fine hand tool work is going to be marking knives. This is another one of those things that are pretty prevalent in fake Chinese remakes on Amazon. That's what half of these are. This is a Type Mark knockoff. It's a piece of junk. Get the actual Type Mark. And then I really like this Veritas dual angle marking gauge. Sometimes it's just nice having two, and the bevels on those are faced in the correct direction for marking out mortises, and it's nice to have one facing opposite, so whatever you're marking out, you have that correct bevel angle for your chisel to fall into. All right, next we'll get into hand point. Get two of these. Doesn't matter what you get. They're all going to do the same thing. You can sharpen the blades. You can get aftermarket blades that are a little nicer than the Chinese ones. But get two because you'll set one and then you'll need to set another one. And resetting these is really a pain in the ass. All right. Next is chisels, or next is planes. That was chisels. Alrighty. So hand planes are a very important part. I've gotten to where I just don't, I don't sand as much as I used to. The finish you get off of a really well-tuned hand plane is bar none. There's no comparison. I started off with these that came out of a box. They were my grandpa's Keen Cutter 4.5 with an aftermarket hawk blade. It was really nice. One thing I might recommend is that you start at least one of them with a nice brand, whether it be Veritas, Lee Nielsen. Just in restorations where you don't know what you're doing, it's really handy to know where you're headed with a tuning of a plane. I screwed around with those forever, and they never quite worked right until I got a new one. And I was like, oh, this is how this is supposed to work. Okay, and it all clicked. But if you're like me, hard knocks at YouTube and reading, trying to figure all this woodworking stuff out, those are the little intricacies that really are easier shown and seeing them figuring out. It's just a frustration point otherwise. So what I would recommend to start, low angled block plane. That is like one of the handiest things that'll always be by your side. And I would probably recommend the low angle jack plane. So it's bevel up. Technically, that makes it a block plane. It's got an adjustable mouth. And then for the blade, you can set it for a low angle, being bevel up. Your primary is your angle of attack. So, or secondary is your angle of attack. So low angle for shooting in grain. You can go high angle. If you've got some tear out, you can also get a toothed blade for really aggressive stock removal. And I think that's like a great place to start. Those two for most applications are going to do you very, very well, especially if they're razor sharp. Okay, and then two more. You need a router plane. That's going to just dial in all of your joinery. Joinery planes are the easiest way to bring your work to the next level and really dial in that fit. Instead of trying to dial in machines, you get it close and then bring it in, a thousandth at a time. And the second is a shoulder plane. I really like this small shoulder plane from Lee Nielsen. It's great. It's not super expensive. And that's going to clean out your rabbets, wide dados, shoulders on tenons. It's very handy. All right. The next thing I'm going to recommend for being really important to start, two hand saws. The first is going to be filed for crosscut. It's called a carcass saw. This will get you very, very fine lines for joinery, cutting sliding dovetails from the cheeks on or the shoulders on tenons. It goes cross grain and it does so very, very cleanly. This is a Lee Nielsen. It's going to have a solid back, so it's a little more affordable. And a dovetail saw. This is filed for RIP. This is a Badaxe, Badaxe. They make a beautiful saw. They have a tension back, so if you ever do kink the plate, there's enough tension held in the back here that it'll pull the plate back straight again. It's nuts, and they are just so sexy, and you should own one. Again, not sponsored. I started off with the Veritas. That'll probably be, if you're just starting out, a little more approachable for price-wise. This is like 14 TPI, filed for RIP. It served me well for a long time. I cut a lot of really bad dovetails and a lot of really beautiful dovetails with this. It is just butt ugly, but it does the same thing. And I think for the hand tool side, there's just two more things I didn't start with, but I think will serve you very, very well. All right, and those two things are going to be Vises and a bench. This is a Rubo style. There are a ton of different styles. This one is Holzapfel. I definitely said that wrong. It's German and has a Z and two Fs. I have no idea how to say that. Holzapfel. Anyway, and having the ability to hold your work still is not only a lot safer, but you're going to find that planing gets easier, that joinery gets easier, and just all of the pieces start falling into place, and you get just a lot less friction. That's something I like to talk about a lot, or I use, especially speaking with my mentor, is just reducing friction in the shop. You want every part to be really enjoyable, and having the ability to hold stuff still in the appropriate manner and not have to chase it all over a table. It's invaluable. So this is a Moxon vise. It's primarily super handy for cutting dovetails, and it just has this front jaw, which is referred to as a chop, and it pinches boards in. I don't have a great example of that, but it'll pinch boards in here. All this hardware is from Benchcrafted. They make some beautiful stuff. It's not only beautiful, but it works well, and it'll last forever. It just holds stuff there. In the Rubo workbench, we've got a tail vise, also known as a wagon vise. That's going to be great for sticking stuff on top of the bench. Tighten this down, and now that doesn't move. You can plane it, you can cut a dado in it, you can do whatever you like. That works extremely well. Sliding dead man, so if you've got that same piece, well, it really works in conjunction with the leg vise. So the leg vise is going to have the most jaw capacity, crisscross. It's super stable. The only downside of it is it tends to rack. So when you put something in one side and not the other, it'll just get all cattywampus. And I've never said that word before, but today I am. And you can, plane the side. It's just a really quick, handy vise to have. You have something very long. The sliding dead man can come in here, and with hold fast, just snug it up to the edge there, and then you can work the whole edge all the way down your bench. One thing this bench does not have is a planing stop. That is probably the next thing that I will add to this bench. All right, let's get into power tools. So for power tools, most people start with a chop saw, and I think that's just the bee's knees. That's what you do everything with. And if you're a carpenter, that's great. If you want to be a furniture maker, that will become absolutely useless. I'm sure somebody will disagree with that, but I use my chop saw. It's a Ryobi. It was, I think, $120 on sale, and it still does its function, which is breaking down rough lumber. That's all I do with it. If I started over again, there are just two power tools that I think a shop needs in order to start making furniture. At least, again, furniture aimed more towards what I do, which is going to be smaller pieces. I don't do a lot of dining tables, smaller, intricate benches and casework, some chairs. Yeah. So this is your table saw. This is an easy way to clear waste for joinery. This is a 14-inch old Rockwell. What it does have is an aftermarket extruded aluminum fence and a lift block. So I think I've got like 14 inches of resaw capacity here. The fence makes it very accurate, very repeatable. I do have a carbide blade in here, and it's a 1/2 inch. So one thing I read starting out was, for resaw, you need a really thick blade. Well, if your saw will turn it. This runs off of a 1 horsepower ball door motor, and that is not to be confused with a jet 1 horsepower. So I came from a Grizzly before this. It didn't tension. It didn't have any power. It wouldn't resaw, and it was a 1.5 horse. This thing powers through 14 inches of white oak without hesitating at all. Definitely old American horsepower. Electric motors, it's 110, are going to have just a lot more power and a lot more versatility than the Chinese ones. So if you're getting an equivalent in the Chinese, I think 3 horsepower is a great place to start. And the second thing that you should probably have, I guess there's 3 machines. Mine's 2. We'll explain that here in a sec. All right. The second machine is a jointer. I don't know why, but it's usually the last thing that we get that actually works well for us, but I think it's one of the most important. Yes, you can joint by hand. You can surface by hand. If you want to make a living, I do not see how that would ever be possible. Unless you've got some very wealthy clientele that appreciates a hand planed and flattened board. So yeah, longer the bed, the better. 6-inch will probably do you fine. This is 10-inch, and I think it's great. Helical cutter heads prevent tear out, just make a lot less work down the road. I don't even pay attention to grain direction anymore. And then the longer the bed, the more use you'll get out of it. So this has extensions front and back, in feed, out feed, and the length here I think is like 30 inches, something like that, which means I can easily do a 6-foot long board and without much effort, an 8-foot long board. Once you get much shorter than that, your board length, it'll just lever off of that center point, and it's just impossible to get a good reference before it hits the cutter head and get a flat board. I did make that workbench 101 inches on a 6-inch long bed jointer, so I think its overall capacity was 54 inches. So it can be done with some janky work support, but longer the better. Helical is just a dream. It's worth every penny, and they're getting really not expensive. They're pretty approachable price wise. And then the second thing is going to be the planer. So this machine is probably not your starter machine, but it converts to a planer. I think a lunchbox planer is great, and actually I use mine quite a bit. I'd show you, but it's buried. I use a rigid 13-inch. It's got the 3 cutter heads. It's and the vacuum to pull out chips. Great for veneers. It's great for pretty much anything you want to put through it. Again, helical is probably better unless we're talking about veneers, and then most helicals have a bottom feed roller, which is going to just eat material. I like this machine because it only has the top roller, so I can put veneers on a sled, slide it in there, and they'll just run through there. And it still eats a little bit, but it's a lot better. So let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. I'm sure I missed something, but those are like the core things that I would really focus on if I were to start this business over again. I started with a benchtop planer, never used it, piece of junk, a contractor table saw, and a bandsaw. It was a Grizzly, and I'm sure it's great for hobbyists, but in a professional shop, it found its shortcomings fairly quickly. And I really wish I had started with something, even that old Delta. Like, I paid $400 for that. It's not a huge investment. This machine, I think new, they're like $4,500. I found used for $2,000. And then I've really just focused more on the hand tool part of my shop. So in summary, I would really focus more on this half of the shop than the power tool half of the shop. Bringing work to a finer quality level, I don't think is something you can buy. It's something you earn by practicing and learning how to fit, first understand grain, how it plays into joinery, how you work with it, and then using that knowledge to work the grain by hand to really hone in the fit for every one of your pieces. So summary, we've got two hand saws, the carcass saw, the short tenon saw, dovetail saw, and then two planes, block plane. The other one's technically a block plane, but it's the low angle jack plane, adjustable mouth, bevel up, and then joinery planes, a shoulder plane and a router plane. Definitely do not need a router table or a handheld router. They are handy in some cases. They make things go a little quicker, but not necessary. Good set of chisels, and number one is going to be your sharpening setup. I know it seems weird to invest when you need all these things in the shop to put hundreds of dollars into stones, because that's about what they cost. Like a good sharpening setup, if you've got 3 stones and a lapping plate, plus your honing equipment, we're probably in the $500 range, US dollars. It's worth it. It'll make every part of your life so much better. So I appreciate you tuning in today. I hope to make this a more regular occurrence. It's nice to meet you all. I've kind of been behind the camera on Instagram, so it's good to get out on this side and kind of break into the YouTube world. I appreciate it. If follow me on here, again, I'm going to make this something sort of on a weekly or more basis, and I'm looking forward to it.